Hey guys, it's Drew again. If you watched my video yesterday that I put out where I showed off my dream card of my Ted Williams from the Leaf set or my Stallmeyer's Carl Erskine, then stick around because today we're showing round 2 of cards I picked up at the National. So let's check it out. So when I went to the National, I had 5 cards on my want list, and if you watched the video that I did yesterday, I had already saved up a chunk of money to be able to get one of them, which was the Ted Williams, which is now over there. And but anything else was going to come out of card stand money, and you guys know that I made these little card stands. And by the way, I've seen so many guys that came up to me and bought these things or got the little freebie that I handed out, and I'm watching your videos over and over. And I keep seeing these, and I really appreciate your support of me to do this, but I gotta be honest, even though I know I'm a little biased, your cards look really good in these things, and I'm not trying to plug them, but since I brought it up, I do still have some left, just kidding, but I've had a number of people kind of ask, and how do I get some of these things or whatever, but I didn't sell everything that I had made, and if you're interested in getting some of these, I'm going to put a link down below for my email, and just email me and say, hey, I might be interested in getting these, and we can chat and get some details on that way. But while I still have some supplies, I'm still happy to make these things. If there's a deluge of people coming in, I can go back out and make more if I need to, but for now, I'll probably have about 15 sets left, so let me know if you're interested, and I'm happy to help you out. Anyway, so as I went, I had 4 cards on my want list outside of the Williams, and I was able to, I knew that if I had sold everything that I had there, I was going to be able to get, well, one of the biggest ones was I wanted to get the Leaf Joe DiMaggio, and I knew that was going to be a tough one because a couple things would happen. First, I'd have to find it within the price, within the range, within the condition, and all that stuff, but I also would have had to sell everything that I had brought as far as the card stands go, and that put a lot of pressure on me to sort of like, I didn't want to come across as like some salesman going around like, hey, you want a card stand or whatever. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to just sort of relax and do this. And as I looked around at cards after I had bought the Williams, I was looking at DiMaggio's, and I noticed 2 things. First of all, they were either really rough, and I didn't really want that, or they were really expensive, or honestly, it was kind of both. And I thought, it's going to be really, really hard to find that card, and I didn't want to occupy the other 3 days I was going to be at the show just looking for this card, trying to sell these stands. So I pivoted, and I was okay with that. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to take the DiMaggio off the table. If it happens, great, and if it doesn't, what else can I get? What do I want to look for? So one of the cards that was on my list originally was I really wanted a T206 Rube Waddell throwing pose, and I used to have the portrait, but I really wanted the throwing pose, and it's a familiar thing if you've ever watched the Ken Burns baseball and they do the chapter on Rube Waddell. It's the photograph that they used. It's actually the same photograph that Ken Burns used is the same one that they used for the image on the T206 card, but I couldn't find one, and it were really expensive, and a graded one was only like, a raw one and an authentic was you know, $150, $160, and I was kind of hoping to keep it down that low. I didn't care if it was a beat up copy. Well, I came across 2 in a table, and this dealer was kind of that sort of sleazy dealer that you get that feeling for. I just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't comfortable. And he had 2 of them. He had one that was graded, which was way too high, and he had one that was graded authentic, which was honestly way too high for the grade. But he kept going on and on about how PSA made a mistake, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, just go send it back to PSA if you really don't want to, because if this card grades as a number, it's going to be way more than you're asking. But he was asking pretty strong for an authentic. But through some negotiating, and he got his price down, I thought, you know what? I've got the money, and now I don't have the burden of worrying about this Joe DiMaggio card. I'm going to spend more than what I was hoping to spend on this card because this is absolutely a beautiful copy in an authentic. But here's the copy that I ended up picking up. So there's the image, and there's a couple of spots on it, but I mean, it's squared up perfect. The color on it, the sort of rainbow effect on the colors in the background, the sunset, it just looks great, and it's a superb image. The back is clean as well, and I just love it. And looking at it closely, honestly, it's probably trimmed a little bit, and that really doesn't bother me. You know, he didn't sell it as trimmed, and I was buying the card for the eye appeal, and it's probably trimmed along the bottom. There's a little bit of a wave cut right underneath his name. You could barely see it, but I don't care because it's such a beautiful image, and I was really happy to pick this up. So card number 3 on my list of what I picked up. So you got the Williams, you've got the Stallmeyer Erskine, and now you've got this beautiful card. So when I was able to pivot from picking up that DiMaggio, I was like, okay, have you ever had a card that you didn't know you wanted until you saw it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, how have I never thought about this card? Well, I mentioned him yesterday, Rick from Vintage Oddball Cards. He had brought some cards that he was selling, trying to gain up funds for a big purchase, and it was when I first met him, he had already previously sold almost everything. But as we were talking, he was flipping through and showing what he had, and this card came up. And years ago, when I type collected, I always wanted a Cracker Jack card. But as you guys know, Cracker Jacks are very expensive, especially for Hall of Famers. And I thought, there's no way I can never get one. So I kind of put that out of my mind. But boy, I love those cards. That deep red in them, the story with them, and still the connection to when I was a kid, where I would get Cracker Jacks and pull out, the toy surprise inside. To think about the fact that these were actually made, well, now 100 years ago, 20 years ago when I was a kid. Not just kidding. Anyway, but I always loved the thought of a Cracker Jack card, and but he had one, but it wasn't a Hall of Famer, and he wanted such a great deal on it, and he's like, well, I've got this card, and he says the name, and when he does, I'm like, no way, I knew exactly who that person was. So I'm going to show you the card, and I ended up getting this from Rick, but this is beautiful. But this is a 1915 Cracker Jack Burt Shotton card, and some of you guys may know who Burt Shotton was. And a lot of you may not, and that's fine. I'm going to tell you who he is in a second. But, if you watch my stuff or you know anything about me, I love the story, and I love the story cards. And this is absolutely a story card that completely 100% fits in my collection. So the best way I describe this, because I showed this at the National to a bunch of guys, and a lot of people are like, I don't know who he is. As soon as I started telling the story, everybody's like, I know who that guy is. So think back. Remember the movie 42, the Jackie Robinson story? And remember how Leo DeRocher was fired right before the season, and they had to find somebody. He couldn't find anybody, and they finally found this older man who was retired, and he agrees that he would manage the Dodgers to start the season, but he never put on a uniform again, and he wore street clothes. Well, that was Burt Shotton. So this card is a playing days card of the first manager that Jackie Robinson ever had in the major leagues. And I thought, man, what a fantastic connection between my love of the history, my love of the stories, my love of Robinson and the Brooklyn Dodgers, and then all the way back to pre-war with this beautiful, beautiful card. So, Rick, thank you for the amazing deal on this. And it was just the right place, right time, right card, everything. And I am so thrilled to have this that, I haven't even thought about the DiMaggio again. So, Rick, again, thank you. And then the not the last card, but the last big card I got. So I had looked around, and one of the big cards I really wanted was a 1938 Goudey heads up Jimmy Fox with scribbles, so really specific. And I looked around, and I only saw two. In fact, a lot of Thursday, I had already bought the Waddell, and I had already made up my mind that I was going to get the Cracker Jack. I knew I was going to see Rick later on that day at the YouTube Hangout, and but I was like, you know what, I'm looking for this card. I looked around for hours and hours and hours, and I only found two. Now, there may have been more, but I only saw two of the card of the Goudey Fox. One of them was a higher grade, therefore a higher price, and way out of my budget for what I was willing to spend on it. The other one was the perfect grade, but he was way overpriced for what he had it for, and I knew that comps on this card, and it's kind of hard to do because there was only one comp on this card down in this grade, and it was last December on eBay, and it was about $460. Okay, and this guy wanted $650. So you're like $200 off of comps, but then again, comps was one card, and I don't really know how to judge that. So I went and I talked to the guy. I was like, well, what's the best you can do? And he's like, well, I could do 600. And I was like, man, but that's like 150. And he goes, yeah, but this is the only one in the show. And I was like, he was right. He kind of had me over a barrel. But I was like, that's a lot of money, more than what I was willing to spend at that point in time. So I walked away. Well, that night I was talking to my crew, Sammy Thunder, and also Jake and Dom, and we just discussed it. We talked about this card, and we decided, you know what, the next morning we're going to go in, and then we're going to come with me and look at this card and just sort of let's kind of go as a group and not strong arm the guy, but let's look it over and talk about it and try to figure out a reasonable thing, and I'm okay to ask for like a lower price or whatever, but I'm not super strong in the negotiating of that kind of thing. I just don't do this much. So we go the next day on Friday, and we go to look at this card again. And the first thing I noticed when we find the table was the guy had changed the sticker from $650 to $700. He actually added $50 to the sticker, and I was like, oh, this is not going in my direction, you know? And so we're there, and I was like, I was here yesterday. He's like, I remember. And he's kind of looking at me like, I got you, man. There's no way I'm going to come down on this. But so I said, you know, you said 6. Is there anything else? And he's like, and he wouldn't budge on it. Well, this is when Sammy came in. And just Sammy, I'm not going to go through all the details of what he did, but man, I appreciate Sammy so much. It was great to get to know him and just really hang out with him and just see his perspective of life and cards and how he does things and whatever. But Sammy is much more experienced at this stuff, and he goes through negotiating, and he was so smooth with it. He was just so easy talking to the guy and showing this and this and this, and the guy kind of knew like, okay, this is the only one I got. But Sammy also knew this car hadn't sold yet, so it was kind of this back and forth thing. Anyway, I'm like, I was willing to spend $550, which is $100 over the comp. But then again, I had sold some stands, I had the money. It was the only one in the show, and I thought, you know what, I could do this thing. And the guy finally came down to $560. He would not budge, and I'm like, this is that whole, are you going to lose the card over $10? It was nothing more than a machismo, like, you know, I'm going to win this deal because I can do it and all this kind of thing. And I thought, whatever, man, I'm going to let you win, but I'm going to walk away with the card for $10. Are you kidding me? So I was able to pick up this beautiful copy, and it's just another clean example of what I was hoping for to find. And I love this card. I love the scribbles on it. I love the double X and cartoon down underneath his legs. I just love it. The back is clean. It's got the typical yellowing, but man, I just love it. And this is just another one of those dream cards. So after I picked up the Williams, after I picked up the Stallmeyers, then I pick up this, then I pick up this, then I pick up this, and I'm like, this is the best card buying experience I had ever had, was these 3 days that I had this. And I, at that point, I was pretty much out of money, or pretty low on money, and I had a little bit left. But I just walked around just smiling, knowing these cards, and anybody I saw, they're like, hey, Drew, I was like, you want to see what I got? I was like a little kid, you know, day after Christmas. And I kept pulling out stuff and showing them over and over again. So, but there was one more card I thought, well, what else could I get? I didn't have much money left, and I walked around, and I've never had an example of this, and I finally found one. It was pretty cheap. It was actually the least amount of money I spent on anything, and but I was able to pick up a Wheaties hand cut, and extremely poorly hand cut, but still a Stam Usual card, just for my Stam Usual collection. It was the low dollar piece, and it didn't take all of my money, but it was the last card that I purchased. So those are the 6 cards I purchased up at the National. But man, it was a lot of fun. The whole thing was a great experience, and I just loved every moment of it. But this is not the last video as far as my National pickup experience. The next one I'm going to do, and I'm not going to say when it's coming out, is going to be my non-card pickups, because I got 2 really cool pieces. One you may or may not have seen, and one I was like floored that I was able to kit this, because it's so me. It's so quirky and odd or whatever, but it's not a card, but you're going to have to wait on that one. So I appreciate you guys that just listen to me ramble on and on about this stuff, but you could tell I'm excited. I love these cards. I love the experience. I love the stories, and honestly, I'm making these videos so I can look back at my own videos later and just get that joy filling me back up again, remembering walking around, seeing Sammy Thunder strong arm a guy to get his price down to a reasonable amount, to remember the story about the guy who was just a curmudgeon old liar, to be honest with you, about that Rube Waddell, or a guy that was just nothing but sweet and just kind and giving me the opportunity to get that Cracker Jack Burt Shotton card. Those are the memories that I want to preserve. Those are the ones I want to share with you guys. So thank you for coming along in this journey, and until next time, you guys be good.